Okay, so the last video that I uploaded about half an hour ago was just to have a quick discussion on how to cut a hole in the mesh. So that was video D, I believe, that talked about how to cut a hole in the mesh. So in class, before the break, we did discuss what would happen in this mesh, in that the footprint of the building would be roughly a rectangle that would fall within, largely within the boundaries of these green lines, which we discussed as the setbacks. Now, I'm not going to specifically do that rectangle that we discussed in class right now, because what I'd like to do is discuss what the footprint is likely to be with reference to the brick rod and how to be clever about setting up the footprint to minimize the cost and minimize the amount of labor involved in building your building. Now, what I mean by this is that because we have determined that this set of apartments will be made of cavity brick, it is important to build or to design your building with reference to what's called a brick rod. Now, a brick rod is one of these. So brick rod is simply, I guess in its most crude complex, a running dimension of standard brick heights and brick lengths. So if you can recall what your brick dimensions are, your brick dimensions are 76 high by 110 width and 230 in length. And then there is a 10 mil thick mortar joint that joins between each brick. So when you look at the brick rod chart, when you've got one course of bricks high, then the length is 230 and the height of the brick, including the mortar joint, is 86, which is 76 plus the 10 mil mortar joint. As you increase the number of courses of brick, then the height is calculated accordingly to take into account the brick and the mortar. Generally, it is best to work with an even number of brick courses. So that means work to either 2 and then 4 and then 6 and then 8 and so forth. Now, a very typical a very typical height of brickwork is 2914 or 2743. Now, these two heights of brickwork work particularly well, considering that, for example, once you take into account a floor slab of, say, between 150 and 200, and then ceiling, floor to ceiling height may then be roughly 2700, which fits to 2 sheets of 1350 mil plasterboard sheets. Okay, so what's happening is that there are many things to take into consideration. There are many things to take into consideration which are largely to do with your standard material sizes. So a very important material size that we need to take into account for this project is, of course, the brick sizes. Now, what we will do is set up the story settings with reference to the brick rod. So what I'd like you to do is to familiarize yourself with a brick rod and have a bit of a look at what a brick rod dimension chart looks like. Now, you can find any brick rod fairly easily on the internet. They are all the same, and so if you do look at, for example, the architecture site for Sydney Uni, then you can find this particular brick rod. But really, a brick rod, if you just type in brick rod into Google, you should see it fairly quickly.